In 1991, a group of salvage divers discovered this wreck at the bottom of the sea. They had no idea they were about to change history.
117.
117.
That's not a U-boat number, though.
Right here.
What does it say?
U-869.
Deep within its metal belly, this sub hid a secret the whole world had tried to bury. A secret that could change what we know of World War II. A secret that the government quickly hid from the public.
And I checked some of my sources that I have here of known wrecks, and there was no known wreck at that exact position.
But at the price of many human lives, was this revelation truly worth it? This is the tale of U-869, a forgotten relic of Hitler's war that eluded any explanation for decades.
There's this Nazi secret. No one can be sure about what's down there. This dream was to develop this bomb that could really devastate and destroy London.
The beginning. The construction of U-869 was ordered on August 25, 1941, under the command of Kapitän-Leutnant Helmut Neuerberg. At the time, Nuremberg certainly had no idea that this submarine would become his grave in just a few years. After 3 years in construction, the U-869 was ready for active service. It was a 251-feet-long beast for a war machine with 6 torpedo tubes and a single 37mm quick-firing gun on its aft winter garden. Certainly not something any battleship would want to face. The U-869 was a silent but deadly killer at sea. But before it could carry out any missions, the submarine and its crew had to spend a year getting trained for war. Most of the crew manning the U-869 were young recruits, with only a few veteran fighters on board. Keep that in mind, because it will be important later. The first journey. Finally, in 1944, the U-869 was ready for its first mission. The command came in. The submarine was to set out on a complete patrol of the Atlantic Ocean, but things didn't pan out as expected. During its entire journey, the submarine did not come across a single enemy vessel. It must have been quite a relief for the sailors aboard. But little did they know of the horrors that awaited them, because when the Nazi command gave the second order for U-869 to travel to the Strait of Gibraltar, the order was never followed. Instead, the U-869, a highly modified submarine with a trained crew, simply vanished. There was no radio communication, no response, and no further contact. Just radio silence. Where did the vessel go? That was a question that even historians couldn't answer. The cover-up. That's when the US government offered an explanation. According to them, the American destroyer USS Fowler and French submarine chaser L'Indiscret came into contact with a submerged enemy ship near Rabat, French Morocco. They deployed depth charges and claimed to have sunk the vessel to the depths of the ocean. The US authorities ran with that claim. The sunk vessel was identified as the U-869, based solely on an assumption, and that soon became recorded history. There were several glaring problems with this account of the U-869's demise. First of all, the submarine had not been sighted at all by those who claimed to have sunk it. The vessel was only thought to be U-869 because it was assumed to have been in the area. It was pure guesswork. Not only that, but there was no German report or witness that confirmed the U-869's last known position. After it had received the command to travel to the Strait of Gibraltar, the submarine had essentially never responded. Even though it was protocol to provide reports during missions, the U-869 never did. In fact, it maintained radio silence and just disappeared. The facts had been bent to fit a narrative that happened to give the US Navy one more win and the now crumbled Nazi Germany another loss. But the false narrative stayed, with no solid evidence to contest it. The pain. The relatives of the 56 crew members who had gone missing alongside U-869 had no idea about the fate of their loved ones. There was nothing to remember them by, no wreck and no bodies, only a plaque and a memorial. Little did they know, it would take decades before the truth about the real fate of U-869 and its crew came to light. And what was revealed still has the experts scratching their heads in confusion. The unlikely meeting. The first indication of the looming discovery occurred not in the Strait of Gibraltar, but on the other side of the North Atlantic Ocean. The year is 1991, and Bill Nagel, the legendary shipwreck diver, was sitting in an inn talking with a charter fishing boat captain when the fishing boat captain made an enticing offer. He wanted to give Nagel information about a wreck that was sitting unexplored in a particularly dangerous part of the ocean just off the coast of New Jersey. And when I say dangerous, that is no understatement. The wreck was located in a depression along the edge of the continental shelf. It was certain death for anyone other than the most experienced wreck divers to go and explore it. After all, the wreck was sitting at a depth of 235 feet, with strong ocean currents turning even the slightest mistake into deadly consequences. The fishing boat captain himself had only found out about the wreck when one of his nets got snagged on the massive object. He hadn't actually seen it. Exploring the mysterious wreck was a complete gamble. It was dangerous, unconfirmed, and probably held nothing of value. But for some reason, Nagel was interested. And that decision alone became the catalyst for uncovering one of the biggest mysteries of World War II. With a small team accompanying him, Nagel traveled to the place where the fishermen had found the wreck. He took no amateurs with him. On his team were none other than John Chatterton and Richie Kohler, both veteran divers who were famous for their skills at navigating even the most dangerous shipwrecks where others often failed.
There's plenty of artifacts of value. There's no real gold or silver that we know about, but artifact value, things like the bell, plates, just souvenirs more or less, but they're worth a lot of money to the right people.
The first dive. With the divers ready, the search began. It was going to be grueling, dangerous, and for some of them, deadly. In the extreme depth where the wreck was located, even a moment of carelessness would spell disaster. The water was murky at best, with visibility limited to just a few feet. The currents were unforgiving, and the limited oxygen in the tanks meant the divers had only so much time to look. But against all odds, Nagel and his team persevered. They were able to find a submarine sitting at the depths of the ocean, untouched by any human since its demise. But one big mystery lingered in the air. Which submarine was it?
The dishes that identified it as a German U-boat from World War II, on the bottom of the bowls, they had the eagle and swastika in the air.
There were no identification marks, no nothing. Unbeknownst to them, some of these divers would have to give up their lives in the pursuit of that knowledge. The curse of Yoo-hoo. The submarine was clearly old, and the divers could safely put it in the World War II era. But then again, they had no way of telling which country it belonged to, let alone finding out its name. So in the meantime, Nagel and his team gave the submarine a temporary name, Yoo-hoo. However, the discovery was soon marred by tragedy. You see, after the Yoo-hoo was discovered, Nagel and his team continued conducting dives to explore the interior. They wanted to find out more about this mysterious vessel. But the extreme diving conditions meant that sooner or later, someone was going to get hurt. And I don't mean a scrap or two. During the 4 years that the team braved the deadly currents to reach the Yoo-hoo, 3 divers met their end.
See archaeologists out here trying to do this work. What we're trying to do is identify the wreck. There's no treasure, there's no loot.
The first was Steve Feldman, who died due to CO2 buildup in 1991. It took 5 months for them to find his body. The next year, Chris Rouse and his son Chrissy met a similar fate due to decompression sickness. Chrissy had gotten stuck in the wreck due to falling debris. His father stayed to help his son, but in the process, both of them had used too much oxygen. While ascending, the lack of oxygen made the father and son confused, causing them to ignore the decompression protocols and come to the surface without any stops. Both of them died soon after surfacing. The wreck was claiming lives fast. Soon enough, a rumor began to spread among the divers. The Yoo-hoo was cursed. And as if to confirm these rumors, Nagel himself died from his alcoholism in 1993. Each year, the wreck had claimed a life, either directly or otherwise. An unending search. Chatterton and Kohler, who were the only ones left in charge of Yoo-hoo diving missions, were having trouble getting new divers on board. Everyone believed the dive was cursed, but despite the rumors, Chatterton and Kohler kept at it. They had found a sense of duty towards the dead crew whose bones still lay inside the Yoo-hoo.
3 taps, 3 tugs, or 3 punches means trouble.
The divers had taken on 2 rules to follow in each dive. They would not film any of the remains of the sailors whose decayed bodies still lay untouched inside the submarine, nor would they disturb the remains in any way. The 2 wanted to give these brave soldiers a name, an identity. But that was no easy task. The progress was slow, with the first clue to the Yoo-hoo's origin coming from the writing on the controls and valves. The writing was German, so it was only reasonable to think that the submarine was also of German origin. Based on location, there were 2 vessels whose wreck this was. The U-550, which sank somewhere around New York, or U-521, which sank near North Carolina. But both of those were sunk a bit too far from the wreckage site to be considered a viable identity. The search had come to a dead end.
First of all, look at this piece of plate right here. I don't know if you can get in close enough to see, but it does look like a sheet of steel.
A new hope. Then, in 1997, the duo discovered another piece of the puzzle. It was a butter knife with an engraving. Not a printed company logo, but a carving done by hand. It was the name of one of the crew members, Horenberg. After reviewing the records, the duo knew that Horenberg was the surname of one of the crew members of the U-869. But didn't U-869 sink near Morocco? According to the records, the submarine could not possibly have been where the wreck was during the war.
100 tons of cordite going off is enormous. It'll tear a ship in half. It tore Invincible in 2.
Having no idea the report was based on shaky grounds, the divers moved on from that theory as well. The breakthrough. It wasn't until the early autumn of 1997 that the divers had their biggest break yet. During one of the exploration missions, they found a box of spare parts in the motor room of the submarine. And there, on the box, clear as day, was a serial number. Had the mystery of Yoo-hoo finally been solved? The serial number was traced back to shipyard records that directly corresponded to the U-869. The civilian divers had done it. After decades, the false story forcibly given to U-869 and its crew was cleared up. Through dedication, sacrifice, and death, the identity of these soldiers lost at sea was revealed. But for Kohler, the story was not yet finished.
We're 20 miles off the Dutch coast. Over there is England, and over there are the Netherlands. I tried to find the 3 cruisers and figure out what has happened to them.
He went to Germany in person and delivered the knife with the Horenberg engraving back to the granddaughter of the sailor. He also tracked down the relatives of other crew members to show them the real fate of their loved ones. The bigger question. One of the mysteries of the U-869 had been solved. But immediately, another one opened up. How did the submarine sink all the way near New Jersey when it was ordered to go to Gibraltar? To this day, no one knows the answer to that question.
see what's left.
That's the forward hatch that your dad asked about. What it tells me is if the hatch is open.
The leading theory is that the ship never received the orders in the first place. There must have been some sort of communication error, and the ship never followed through with the command. It had continued its mission to New Jersey until it sank. However, a recent find in one of the compartments of the U-869 has challenged that theory. But before I tell you about that, there is one more mystery we must address. And that mystery is of how the U-869, which was by all means one of the most advanced submarines of its time, sank into obscurity. The damage. According to the divers who found the wreck, the submarine had sustained serious damage. And not all of it was from rust and decay. The port side of the submarine's control room was more or less eviscerated, and that was one of the reasons why identifying the wreck took so long. Several of the documents that could have helped identify the vessel were blown up in the explosion that destroyed the control room. Additionally, the hull on the port side of the officers' quarters had sustained damage. It is theorized that the U-869 was hit by 2 blasts, and the destruction was swift and sudden. The bodies of the crew were not anywhere near the escape pods. Their death was sudden, unexpected, and painful. They had died where they stood, with barely any time to react. What could have caused such destruction? There is no solid explanation, no concrete proof. What we do have are theories that might explain the sinking of U-869. An unfortunate turn. The first theory relates to a common problem with the World War II submarine torpedoes.
2 ready. Fire 2. 2 on the way.
You see, sometimes the submarines would fire a rocket, and due to a malfunction or the gyroscope not functioning correctly, the torpedo would circle around and lock onto the submarine that fired it. The result, as you can guess, was disastrous, with the submarine going down from its own torpedo. This phenomenon was called a circular run, and according to some experts, the U-869 fell victim to the same issue. But why did the sub fire a torpedo in the first place? There are 2 answers. Either the U-869 fired upon a ship the crew had sighted, or it was a test fire. Whatever the case, the torpedo turned right around and hit the submarine. It sounds reasonable enough of an explanation. However, there are several problems with this theory. Number 1 is that there was no record of any ship witnessing such an explosion. Secondly, the circular run was a known problem with the German torpedoes. The crew of U-869 was inexperienced, sure, but they were also highly trained. They would have known the best countermeasure in such a situation was to simply change the submarine's depth to avoid a hit. Surely the crew would not have fallen victim to such a rare occurrence.
The Hedgehog consists of about 30 small bombers. Each bomber about 30 pounds. 30 pounds against the hull of a submarine is lethal.
Hunted and killed. Hence why the experts came up with a second theory. This version gives the credit for sinking the U-869 to 2 U.S. destroyer escorts, the USS Howard D. Crowe and USS Coiner. According to reports, the 2 ships came across what they believed to be a German submarine off the coast of New Jersey. 14 minutes after contact, one of the ships fired Hedgehogs, a type of anti-submarine missile, onto the target.
Made contact. They asked for help, and we left the convoy and went over there to help them, and we dropped depth charges and everything.
The other ship joined in on the attack, throwing depth charges. With each explosion, bubbles and oil would come up to the surface, both signs of a hit. After staying and attacking for some time longer, the destroyers moved on to accompany the ship they were escorting. Some experts claim that this encounter caused the U-869 to sink, with the explosion hitting the hull of the submarine and breaching it. But like the previous theory, there are some problems with this theory too. The biggest one is that the wreck is located 46 miles away from where the destroyers claim to have had the encounter. That is a distance far too large to be believable. No submarine that has been hit so many times could have made it to that distance. And judging by the locations of the crew's bodies, their death had been instant. They had no time to move the submarine 46 miles before it sank. The US government, however, has chosen not to see these contradictions. According to the US Navy, this is the official narrative of what happened to the U-869. It is understandable why they picked this version. After all, it kept the Navy from losing a kill in World War II, the explosion within. There is, however, a third theory still. According to a few experts, the submarine may have fallen victim to an internal explosion. A torpedo could have exploded inside the tube or while being fired. But the damage patterns and the bending of the hull from the explosion do not correspond to an internal explosion. Ultimately, the reason why the U-869 sank remains a complete mystery. The US Navy surely has its answer, but it will take much more evidence to convince an unbiased person. The mysteries don't end yet, though. There is still one final piece to the puzzle that I haven't told you yet. An unlikely survivor. As I said earlier, the U-869 had a total of 56 crew members, but in the wreckage there were only 55 bodies. That is because one of the crew members survived. Herbert Gushewski was a radio operator assigned to the U-869, who was lucky enough not to be on board during the last voyage of the submarine. Herbert Gushewski had gotten pneumonia and pleurisy just days before the submarine was supposed to leave, and so he was left ashore, as the rest of the crew went to fulfill their duty. Gushewski turned out to be a crucial link in confirming the identity of the U-869's wreck, since he recognized the surname of Horenberg carved on the pocket knife as that of his fellow radio operator, Martin Horenberg. His statement came as the double confirmation that solidified the fact that the wreck was indeed that of U-869. For a long while after its identity was confirmed, the U-869's mysteries were considered resolved. But recently, there has been a new discovery: the sealed chamber. According to online sources, the divers found a sealed part of the submarine that had remained inaccessible for a long time due to technological limitations. But in 2024, it finally became possible to access it, and what the divers found inside will shock you to your core. Inside the compartment, everything was completely preserved, as if time itself had stood still. Inside, the divers found clothes, ration tins, logbooks, and other such necessities. But there was one other thing that immediately caught the attention of the divers. It was a ceremonial dagger, with a motto of one of the elite units of the German units engraved on it. Next to it was a sealed crate with a Kriegsmarine dress uniform with the swastika armband and the Iron Eagle insignia.
According to the war records, there isn't supposed to be a U-boat for 100 miles in either direction. And that's when the mystery really.
The divers also found a box full of Nazi memorabilia and a Nazi flag in astonishingly good condition. It was folded with military precision. There was also a code book and a bunch of Nazi propaganda posters next to the flag. The news of this find was never allowed to reach the public for obvious reasons. The discovery of these items puts a huge question mark on the true purpose of U-869. Was it just a submarine on patrol, or was there more to it? Judging by the contents of this compartment, it is possible that the U-869 was on a secret mission to drop off undercover operatives on the shores of the United States. That would explain why the submarine had remained radio silent even as it encountered an emergency. It was on a secret mission that must under no circumstances be made public. A significant find. This theory, unfortunately, has not yet been confirmed. But if it is true, then the reach of Germany's propaganda machine and spy network was far more extensive than previously thought. Not only that, but there are other concerns associated with the discovery of a German U-boat so close to American shores. The wreck shows that the German U-boats were diving far and wide across the American shores to take down any ships carrying war supplies to Europe. It became so much of a problem that the shipping lanes near North Carolina became known as Torpedo Alley. The presence of the U-869 shows that even during the tail end of the war, Germany's U-boats were still a terror in these waters. U-869 tells us one more thing. That history is written by the victor. The real story of U-869 would have been lost to history had that one fisherman not come across Bill Nagel at just the right time and at just the right place. Without the dedication and sacrifices of all those divers, the mystery of the shipwreck off the coast of New Jersey would have remained just that, a mystery. Who knows how many more ships and submarines just like U-869 still remain undiscovered around the world, with their demise being falsely reported to justify the losses of one country or another during the world wars. With that, we are done for today. How do you think the U-869 actually sank? Let me know your theories in the comments down below. I would love to read them all. And while you are at it, be sure to like the video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, goodbye and stay curious.